Hello and welcome to another informative and educational episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. I'm your co-host Steve Wirt, and I'm joined by
I'm Tim Hannon, and we always aim to inform and educate.
yes. So on this episode, we'll a brief history of the owners of the Pittsburgh sports teams. So kind of stole something from Stephen Hawking there. A brief history of time. Yeah. So on this episode, we're gonna just look at some of the more memorable owners of the various Pittsburgh sports teams, and some were cheap shots, some cheap, you know, not cheap shot, but they were just cheap, and some were just trying to survive. But they all contributed to the Pittsburgh sports landscape, and it was either negative or positive. But hey, they did more than me or you ever did. They owned a sports franchise, so good for them. And just as a note, this is not all inclusive. I'm sure I'm leaving people out, but I just went with the people who I thought I remembered or people would recognize, or that were at least memorable in some way. Somebody who me and Tim will probably never forget, and that might not be a good thing, was Howard Baldwin. Yes, our favorite movie producer turned sports owners. He owned the team from 1992 to 1999. He did win a Stanley Cup, but unfortunately, the price of that Stanley Cup came at putting the team into bankruptcy. Again, this is actually the team's second bankruptcy or third bankruptcy?
Second,
Second, okay. I
we're
don't think they've
still
had a.
we're if we get to the third, I think we get some kind of special NHL designation at that point.
We get a free prize from the federal
Right,
government. Yeah.
steak knives.
Nice. Nice. So Baldwin's special, the way Howard Baldwin would buy franchises, he would buy them with investing his own money, which is, I mean, that's a great way to do business. They said his initial cash investment was just $1,000. I mean, in 1990, I think between the two of us, Tim, we could have scraped up $1,000, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great way to go through life. I guess I wish I could get cars and houses and boats and without having to spend any of my own money. Kudos to him for
Yeah.
pulling that off.
Yeah, I mean, we could have been owners of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, if we would just invested $2,000 maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
we could have outbid him.
But the rest was assumed debt and capital, which I guess is where he got us beat, because I don't think anybody's loaning us millions and millions of dollars. So it was bankrolled by a guy named Morris Belsberg, and that was a bad idea on all accounts. And we kind of went over this on the what podcast was that? That was the
The goal that saved the Penguins. Yeah, we
yeah,
talked about this.
he signed a lot of bad lease deals and advertising and stuff. He really locked in the Penguins to a no-win situation. He signed Mario to a huge contract and just made a lot of really bad deals that the team couldn't afford. So he also he had an American League hockey franchise in Wilkes-Barre. Actually, the Wilkes-Barre Penguins he created. So when the guy that was financing all this, the Belsberg, left, he recruited a guy named Roger Marino, who was even worse. And they ended up declaring bankruptcy in November 1998. And the upshot of that was the team ended up being sold to Mario Lemieux and Ron Burkle. There were rumors of the team just being folded at that point, or I guess the stars being distributed around the league. I mean, we had talked all about that. Basically, the book on Howard Baldwin was he was a big spender that didn't have the money to back it up. The type of guy that is. I guess that's the way you make a movie, and unfortunately, the way you make a movie isn't the same way that you should probably be running a sports franchise. So, I mean, he won us a Stanley. He got us a Stanley Cup, which is a lot more than a lot of other people on this list. But at what cost? At almost losing the franchise. So he's a pretty bad guy. He added those ridiculous seats way up in the rafters. So any other thoughts on Howard Baldwin there, Tim?
So yeah, the ridiculous seats were section F at the arena, where you basically hung them off the roof. And I had season tickets up there at one point, and it was an experience. I'll say that it was cheap too, so at least you could
The
afford to go
view
to
was
Penguin
good.
games.
I will say this: the view really wasn't that bad.
It
It
was
just
well,
was
yes. When you're
just
literally hanging off the roof, it's definitely an interesting bird's eye view of what's happening on the ice. But yeah, he just. I mean, Steve, I don't know how you feel about um, like I used to. There was a time in my life where I really believed that anyone who has that much money, right, who's the head of a huge corporation or a self-made millionaire, billionaire, those kinds of people, I just always thought, boy, they must be so smart. They must have made so many great decisions, just so many skills that, I or the common person could never possess. And I think now that I'm, older in life, I feel like it's not necessarily true. And I think Howard Baldwin's a great example of that.
well, I think there is sometimes like a little luck involved, and you do have to have some business acumen. But some people like it isn't like he inherited his money.
Right.
I mean, I don't think. I mean, but some people just the old what is the line from Seinfeld? Fall ass backwards in the money, and
Right. Right. Yep.
So I mean, I think he was kind of one of those people. Like we all have friends like that just like for some reason they just kind of float through life, and it's like, oh look, I got another $1 million. It's like, wow, lucky you. But
And you're
hey,
right. And you're right. He had to have had some kind of uh, business acumen, and I maybe the other thing to say about people like that is they're also risk takers. That's how they
yeah,
got where they are, and most of us aren't. And maybe it's not totally fair to just focus on the risks that failed, right? Because those are obvious and easy to criticize. So maybe there's that factor as well.
I didn't look into what I mean. He must have had a couple successful movies elsewhere or something. I mean,
Well, he did make
I-
Sudden Death, and I think that won at least 4 or 5 Oscars, if I remember right.
yeah, I think he owned the Hartford Whalers, and he did keep them afloat until they weren't,
Yeah.
till they moved. So, I mean, he is kind of like, at least in Hartford, Connecticut, he kind of has a mixed reputation. Like, he did some things right there and a lot of things wrong. But
Remember, he also had that investment in the Moscow hockey team, the the,
yeah,
the Russian
yeah,
Penguins.
with the cages in the basement, or
Right, right.
that's where
But
they put the bad players. If you have bad game, you go down and sleep
but
in the
that
cage.
that whole story was interesting, and that actually was a huge success for a while until Russia got all Russia with it, and we did a whole episode on that too. That's
Yeah.
a really fascinating story. But so yeah, he was a risk taker, and sometimes you need to take risks, and sometimes they'll blow up in your face, but other times you won't get anywhere if you don't. So
Yeah, we kind of have another guy that's kind of like that on this list, but I think he was a little more upstanding citizen than this guy. And I remember I couldn't find a clip of it, but I remember Bino Cook bet him that he would leave town within like 2 years or like something like that. And I forget what the exact bet was, but Bino Cook ended up being right. So, um, next up is a person we've discussed before, but maybe we don't really, you might not know him. It's a gentleman named Gabe Rubin. He was the owner of the Pittsburgh Pipers and later Pittsburgh Condors. And he actually won the ABA championship with Connie Hawkins. So he owned a basketball team in Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, after winning said championship, and was that one here or was that was in New Orleans, wasn't it? I think it was.
it was yeah, I know it was against New Orleans. I don't know where the game seven
Yeah.
was, but I know it went to 7 games and they beat
Yeah.
the New Orleans Buccaneers, the team with the goofy logo, is what I remember from our previous
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, so I mean they win a championship, so how do you, capitalize on that championship? Obviously you move the team to Minnesota, to a city that had just totally not, supported the team that had just folded. and this is the high heady days of the American Basketball Association. So this is like what, late 60s, early 70s. So I mean, then they did come back, and the Civic Arena was empty because you literally ditched Pittsburgh for a year to come back, and they had solid attendance before the move, but then after the move, they didn't have people didn't care about basketball anymore, and yeah, and it's finally in the spring of 1970, this Rubin guy sold his team to a corporate owner, Haven Industries, and they eventually folded. I think the team eventually folded after like 2 or 3 more seasons with that company. But this guy was kind of like another risk taker and just didn't. I think did he own the Triangles too? Can't remember if he did, but he just not a good decision, and it had nothing to do with like money or basketball. Just like I think he just wanted to move the team to Minnesota. There's not really a good reason why he did, and it just totally alienated his fan base, and that was a poor decision. Speaking of taking risks, Tim, why would I don't understand why you would. And like, how did he market that in Minnesota? Welcome your champion, Minnesota Pipers. I just.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the trajectory of the team we just talked about, the Penguins, they were barely surviving for years and years, and then when they started winning, then they started building this incredible fan base. But you needed to win first, and then wait for that fan base to come. And when the Pipers were in the ABA finals, I mean, that was a big deal, and people were coming to the games, and they were excited. The whole city was excited about it. And you had all this momentum, so why not carry it into at least one more season, right? I could see if you go into the next season and maybe you have like that championship drop off, and then people, aren't interested anymore. But man, why wouldn't you've just given it one more year? And I think, Steve, you made this point in the episode we did about that, where you said, given where the Penguins were at the time in the late 60s, early 70s, we could have had, because the ABA eventually merged into the NBA. The Indiana Pacers, the Spurs, the Nets, all those teams got folded into the NBA. We could have been an NBA city.
Yeah, it's kind of like an interesting what if. Like, what if, like, he keeps the team here and they build a fan base and they're successful? Are the Penguins the team that folds?
Yeah.
Doesn't make it. And Pittsburgh is like Cleveland with a basketball, football, baseball instead of how Cleveland that's how Cleveland is instead of hockey, football, baseball. So, or even Cincinnati is like kind of comparable to us, but they're more. I would say that they're more soccer as their third sport, because that MLS team I think averages 35,000 fans a game, so that they have a solid fan base for that team. So it's interesting the what ifs, but. I mean, I kind of, at the end, will kind of list, like, who I think the best and the worst of this is. But I kind of, like, label him as the guy who killed professional basketball.
Yeah, I agree. And the Penguins, you said they declared bankruptcy twice. The first time was, I think, in 75 or 76.
Yeah, it was middle. So, like, if, let's say, the Condors or Pipers or whatever they finally settle on a name are here and successful, like, people are like, yeah, whatever, who cares about hockey? And then imagine a Pittsburgh-Cleveland rivalry in football and basketball. That would be wild. Even though we both have baseball teams, we don't play each other that much. So
right. And then I mean, you could go on down the line of what if, and then
where does Mario end up? Mario ends up in like Montreal.
Yeah,
Canadians 6 cups later. They would have had him and Patrick Waugh at the same time.
Yeah, and then
they'd have been all right, Tim.
I would have loved
you or me could have coached that team, and we would have won a Stanley Cup.
And then I would love to do the what if on the NBA side. So let's just say that they absorb Pittsburgh in instead of like San Antonio, like bigger city, and then Pittsburgh is the team with David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and so think about that.
Greg Popovich.
Yeah.
Well,
so we could take that all the way.
championships. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love the Pens, so I'm not regretting that. But it for him personally, he could have been really at the forefront of something big, and yeah, it was a weird decision on his part. Obviously, he
Yeah.
regretted it because he moved the team right back.
Yeah. Well, it's just so stupid. Like, I I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking. It'd be great to like read. I think the guy is dead. I don't think he's alive anymore. So I don't think we can go like track him down in whatever nursing home he's in. Yeah. Mr. Rubin, what did you think of your decision to move to Cyprus in 1970? What?
I'm sure
Who are
he'd be
you?
very eager to talk to us, of all people.
What's your name?
Yeah.
Are you here to change me? Anyway, moving on to people that probably should be changed. Bob Nutting. Yes, the owners keep getting worse, Tim, don't they? Um, he bought out Kevin McClatchy in 2007 to become the principal owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Under him, at least the Pirates have had 3 wild card appearances and 1 wild card win. So, hey, that's something, right? That's kind of better than another Pirate owner that I have listed on this list. But only 4 winning seasons since 2007. He actually sold his ski resorts. Did you know that, Tim, in 2021? And now he just owns the Pirates.
Create more
Um,
time and energy for him to focus on making the team worse. That's wonderful.
he's the type of owners that other owners love. You know why? He doesn't make waves. He just kind of goes along, signs off whenever Scott Boras and the Union wants, and whatever the Yankees and Dodgers want. And it's an easy win for the other teams in the league. And, they get a nice cut of the TV profits from Pittsburgh, I'm sure. And, hey, it all works out for everybody except for the fans in Pittsburgh. And who cares about those people? Because, baseball still doesn't understand that they're not competing against the Pirates. They're competing against the Steelers. But maybe someday the ownership of the Dodgers and the Yankees will figure that out, but that day is not today. Will he ever sell the team? I don't know. Probably not. It just seems like he doesn't want to spend the necessary money to field a winning team. And so the only way I ever see the Pirates winning is unless the team gets lucky. And even then, just like we saw like 2 or 3 years of success, you'll never see sustained success out of this franchise. Like, I mean, I guess Kansas City kind of went through that where they were good for a little while and then they stunk. But Tampa has had sustained success and were pretty good last year until their one guy got convicted of like crime. But I don't know what to say about this guy except for he's not a very good owner. He's kind of in the realm of who's the guy that owned the Clippers for years.
Sterling.
Yeah, or like Brown and the Bengals.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't know whatever happened. Mike Brown like woke up and started like doing things better over there in Cincinnati.
Well, that's who I always compared him to, Nutting, is Mike Brown, because Mike Brown
Well,
inherited that team from his father.
he hung on to Shula for how long? David Shula.
Oh yeah, well, and Marvin Lewis was our coach for like 38 years too, through a lot of mediocre seasons.
At least Marvin Lewis was mediocre. David Shula was god awful.
Yeah. I mean, he ran that team on the cheap for about 30 years, but like you said, something clicked at some point, and maybe it's
Somebody
like,
else is running it now. I don't know.
well, no, I think he's still running it. I wonder if there's just like you get to this point later in life, and maybe you have all the money you could possibly want, and if there's one thing I can't claim to know the minds of billionaires, but I one thing that I think sometimes happens with some folks like that is they get kind of like, I want to do something on a whim kind of thing, or not even on a whim, but I've done everything there is to do. I want to do something different. I mean, like Elon Musk buying Twitter, I think is a good example of that. And I wonder if Mike Brown just decided, okay, I'd like to actually win a Super Bowl here, and he's done really good things with that franchise. And I will say, I've ripped Bob Nutting on the show many times, and I don't like Bob Nutting, and I hate what he's done to the Pirates. But I will say, at the time we're recording this, he's made some really good moves the last couple of years. They drafted that Skeens kid who, that's a guy they wouldn't have drafted 20 years ago or 10 years ago. They would have passed him up because he would have been too much to sign. And then they gave him a big contract, and then they locked up their two best players for multiple years. So I think he's actually making some decent moves. Uh, definitely not Dodger type moves, but you wouldn't expect that from any owner of the
I'd
Pirates.
just be happy with Tampa Bay type
Right.
success.
Right.
And it's not like Tampa's like we're in like a much better situation. Like I think competing with the Cardinals in Chicago is easier than the Yankees and Red Sox, and Tampa seems to pull it off every year. So I
Well, that's what I mean. I think he's got. Again. I think he's at least trying to do something a little bit different. Maybe. Maybe that's just me wishful thinking. But if Mike Brown could, after 30 years of running the franchise into the ground, if Mike Brown can turn it around, maybe Bob Nutting can too.
yeah, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't hold out much hope. You never know. And then sustained success is tougher to come by, but
It is, but I would take like those 3 years of being in the playoffs. I would take that again. And
yeah, that seems to be like you said. If the moves they do pan out even half, like a guy, their best player got hurt last year,
right,
like that's going to happen. But like if half their moves pan out, I think they're at least going to be competitive. And with the expanded playoffs, there's a good chance they're going to make the playoffs again one of these years.
right. And if that Skeens is anywhere close to what I mean, he's one of those once
Pitching's
in a
such a
generation pitching prospects.
pitching
So
is such a crapshoot. You never know.
it is, but I mean, he's like that, like that Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, like that once in a generation kind of guy. Connor McDavid, he's like that, and so if that pans out, that could work, and that's sustained success. The Pirates could have still done that after 2015 if they would have tried. They just didn't. They just decided, well, that we've spent enough money, we're going to go back to the old way. So it's possible, and like you said, other teams have done it. Definitely, it's stacked against you the way baseball's set up, which is ridiculous. But it's possible. Like you said, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, other teams have done it, San Diego. So it's possible.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Um, Moving on to owners that were very successful and then were successful later in life. That would be Art Rooney Sr., and we did a whole podcast on him. So we'll just kind of go over it. He was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He founded and was chairman of the Steelers from 1933 to 1988. He oversaw, and I'll put this in very big quotation marks, oversaw 4 Super Bowls in the team of the 70s. It really was Dan who ran the team, which we should probably do a whole podcast just on Dan Rooney because that guy's the legend. But from 1967 to 1970, he was part of the owner. He was part owner of the Penguins. He used influence to get the Penguins here, and he was there in the bad days of the Steelers. His quote was, "The biggest thrill wasn't winning on Sunday; it was making the payroll on Monday." Just a founder of the NFL and pro sports in Pittsburgh, 2 successful franchises he kind of helped spawn. Probably a better person than team owner, but it was nice later in life. I think he was such a good person. Everyone was really happy to see him win a couple Super Bowls, and everybody in Pittsburgh loved him, and the team loved him. And good for him. He seemed like a good person that deserved it.
Yeah, Art Rooney, obviously a legend in this town. Like you said, probably doesn't. Dan really is the glue. Dan really deserves the credit for all the success the team had, but the team wouldn't even be here and wouldn't have been kept afloat all those years if not for Art. Wouldn't have the identity it has if not for Art. So, again, deserving legendary figure.
Yeah, and I just, good guy and great person to like read his biography, and just the way he handled himself and dealt with people, and just a quality individual. Moving back to baseball, an owner who people might Ever heard of John W. Galbraith? He owned the Pirates from 1950 to 1982. And in that span, the Pirates won 3 World Series, 1960, 71, and 79. And actually in the 70s, they had a really good team. It just, they played in the same league as the Cincinnati Reds. So, and the Cincinnati Reds were really good in the 70s. It's funny, the 2 best teams of the 70s in the National League were Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, wouldn't you say, Tim?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of
I mean,
those. It was kind of like what was
that's never going
happening.
to happen again.
Well, yeah, that's true. And it was kind of like what was happening in football with like Pittsburgh and Oakland and Pittsburgh and Houston. You had sometimes the best teams were fighting each other just to get out of the same division or the same league. And that was really tough.
Well, John Galbraith made a fortune in commercial property development. He built skyscrapers, both in the United States and overseas. He actually bought in 1946, he had bought a 20% stake in the Pirates. I guess there was a 4-man ownership group. And then in 1950, he finally bought them out and became the majority owner. The partners way back when in 1946 was one Bing Crosby. He would sing you a song. I don't know if he still was an owner in 1950. Maybe he was because, you know, he was the first owner to break the so-called $1 million mark when he signed Dave Parker in 79. Look at that. The Pirates spending money, Tim. And he also was out of the team when they drafted Roberto Clemente on a Rule 5 draft. Boy, the Brooklyn Dodgers were really smart to let him go. What are they going to do next? Move to California? The team fell apart in the mid-'80s. He had to sell to a corporation called Time Warner, who were they owned by Ted Turner at that point? Probably.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was in the 80s, maybe. I don't know. And he was just doing that to keep him afloat. And then we played on the one podcast a whole Adam Lynch segment about the Pirates moving, and it's a great segment if you get a chance to listen to it. And you're threatening to move the team to New Orleans of all places. I guess they were going to play baseball in the Superdome, I guess. And he was just very successful owner until I don't know if the family just ran out of money and just decided they were spending too much money on baseball and decided to get out of baseball. And that's kind of what the Galbraiths did. They got out of baseball, sold the team to a what was it, like a public-private partnership group of like local businesses.
Yeah. They always used to use the word consortium. I don't know if that's an official term or if that was just what they call it. But Mayor Caligiuri got together all these big Pittsburgh companies, and they all basically co-own the team for about 10 years.
Yeah. So just like I said, I think he's very successful. One of the more successful owners of the Pirates. Well, I guess there's another guy on here that might be a little more successful, but it's just very successful and good ownership. Well done by the Galbraiths there. Moving on to the next person that we've definitely heard of and talked about before, Eddie DeBartolo Sr., the late Eddie DeBartolo Sr. He owned the Penguins from 1977 to 1991. They got a Stanley Cup win in 1991. He also owned the Spirit indoor soccer team. He owned that team from 1981 to 1986. They never won any championships, but I think they made a few playoff appearances. And he owned the Maulers, the first iteration of the Maulers that folded after one season, not the second iteration of the Maulers that just folded after 2 seasons. So if you're a Pittsburgh Mauler, I'm sorry, your team is just doomed to get not folded, I guess. They bought the Penguins in 1977, and I think they added stability to the franchise. And how Mr. DeBartolo made money was he built malls, which were very popular in the 70s and 80s. So if you ever went to Century 3 Mall, you went to a mall that Eddie DeBartolo was in charge of building. So that's how he made his fortune. He did that. I don't know, at least in Pittsburgh and Ohio, he did that in a lot of different places. So, um, in when they won the cup in '91, a fun fact, his daughter Denise DeBartolo York, they got she was the president of the team. Did you know that? She during the
Her
championship season. So
her her
and she
name
was
her name's one of the first names. If you look at like the 91 Penguins
yeah,
list of names, she's like
because
it's
she
like
was
her.
yeah she was the uh, president, and she was the third woman to serve as a president of a Stanley Cup winning team. And the following year, '91, being the smart businessman that he was, he sold the team to Howard Baldwin, unfortunately. But hey, I guess he got paid. Um, DeBartolo said at a rally after the first win of the Stanley Cup, possibly the happiest moment of my life. And just to follow up on Denise Bartolo York, the name should sound somewhat familiar if you're a sports fan, because her brother, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., owned the 49ers. And the 49ers were sold by Eddie. He had he was getting in trouble with some sort of politician, so he sold the team to his sister, and his sister now has transferred ownership to Jed York, who now owns the team, and that's how Jed York. So it's still in the DeBartolo family, just under Eddie DeBartolo Jr.'s nephew. So would that be nephew or great nephew? Not just nephew. So, just like I said, he's definitely a state. He's like one of those guys. I think he's the guy like you're talking about, Tim. Like he was more smart with his money, and he definitely had more business acumen than Howard Baldwin. But he did some things that were successful, like the Penguins, and he did some things that weren't successful, like the Maulers, and he did some things that were kind of in between, like the Spirit, like where they were successful for a while until they weren't. So he knew what he was doing, and I think a good owner overall. Good owner, brought a championship to the Penguins, kept the Penguins in town. Supplied some thrills with other teams. But what say you about Mr. DeBartolo Senior?
Yeah, definitely a good owner. I mean, you could say, well, you're very fortunate to get Mario Lemieux in the middle of all that, but one player doesn't make a team. And then his daughter, like you said, Denise to Bartolo York, it'd be interesting to delve further into her at some point because they don't win a Stanley Cup until she's running the team. So is it like a Art Rooney, Dan Rooney kind of situation? You have to wonder that. And then her name is the first one. If you look at the Stanley Cup from 1991, her name's like the first name on the Stanley Cup for the Penguins. So she was, we're going to talk about all men owners and probably in this podcast, but she was a pretty integral part of ownership and still co-chair of the 49ers today, which, as you pointed out, is a pretty successful franchise as well.
Hey, this is the place where DEI goes to die.
Well, yeah. Ownership of sports teams usually is.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of respect this guy, and I think Denise York, DeBartolo York, they still live in Canfield, Ohio.
Oh, really?
So,
interesting.
She's in her 70s. I actually looked it up. She's in her 70s, and her husband was some sort of cancer research doctor. They have like 4 kids, so Jed is only just one of the kids. I guess he was the only one interested in running an NFL franchise. I don't know if I had like 3 other siblings, I'd be like kind of fighting to be in there, but kind of like what's her name, Jeannie Buss for the Lakers. Like how she helped run the Lakers there after Jerry Buss died. So, moving on to a guy who like I'm not sure, like he kind of has a mixed legacy, or maybe I'm giving him too much credit here. That would be one Kevin McClatchy. And he owned the team. He was the guy that bought the team from the consortium. He owned the Pirates, and he bought the Pirates from that consortium of, what would you call it? Local businesses that had owned the team. He owned the team in 1996. He definitely bought the team. but we're not quite sure when he transferred ownership to Bob Nutting. So I have 2005, maybe. So we think that's when it's happened. And the reason we don't know is because the Pirates are a private company, and so they can do whatever they want with their ownership and don't have to tell us boo. And they don't, as is their right.
Yeah, definitely they're right. It's a good thing that they're a private company and only do things with private dollars, never use public
Well,
taxpayer funded anything. You know, they're totally
that's
private and they deserve to just keep all their business to themselves, right?
yeah. Well, that's kind of what happened was he was the big guy. He was the guy that got PNC Park built with public money, and that was his big push. How he made his money is he did inherit his money. He's part of the McClatchy group that I guess they own newspapers across the country, and I wonder how that business is going.
What's a newspaper?
Yeah, really. So he's not doing. See, Tim, there were these things that people used to buy to line the bird cage with, or if your dog peed on the floor, you'd put it down. It worked
Oh,
well
okay.
for that.
Wow, I wouldn't think there'd be that big of a market for that, but good for him.
Yeah, it had words on it, but mostly people used it for whenever your dog went to the bathroom. I mean, I don't know why we just didn't use paper towels, but newspaper seemed to be a better choice.
I hear people in movies always also used to use it too. Hide behind in certain scenes,
Yeah.
pretending to be
Or
reading
like
it.
this, they would spin and like give you like a plot. They would advance the plot.
Yes. That's another good use of those things. Good
Steve
call.
and Tim's podcast, a big time. Yeah, nah. But getting back onto the thing, at some point we don't know when. We think it's 2005. They sold to Bob Nutting. Who knows? It's just like such a mess. McClatchy openly in 2006 speculated about resigning because the team had been so bad for so long. Like I said, they didn't do anything besides get PNC Park built, which was a really big thing because I guess the Pirates were threatening to move. They stayed in town. So on 2007, it was finally announced that McClatchy would step down as CEO, and I don't know if he even owns anything. I don't know if he owns any of the Pirates or he's just like a minority owner, or I think he stops in and sees a game now and then more than Bob Nutting does. I don't know, totally inept ownership. I don't find them as cheap as they just didn't know what they were doing. And but they got PNC Park built. And that seems to be what this team did well, is getting the game day experience right. Everything that wasn't on the field, they did right. And everything that was like related to baseball, they did wrong, which is just, I don't know. I don't know how else to put it.
So yeah, you're right. McClatchy there's nothing to really celebrate there. I'll do my best, Kevin McClatchy apologist, little diatribe here. I think probably what he did well was he tried to set the team up for success, and it just didn't work out that way. So you remember he signed Jason Kendall to a really long-term contract. He signed Kevin Young to a long-term contract. He made the trade for Brian Giles and signed him to a long-term contract. He thought kind of probably, hopefully not similar to what I was just talking about with Nutting in the current team, but they tried to lock up some guys that they thought could give them a good future. And then getting PNC Park built, it was like, okay, not only do they have these guys locked up, but now they're going to have more revenue coming in and maybe really be able to build something. And of course, none of that even remotely worked out the way he planned it. The other thing that I remember about Kevin McClatchy is he was so young. I think he was in his 30s, Steve, when he took over as the Pirates owner. He was this very young owner. Like you said, he inherited his fortune, so that's kind of why. But there was a season or two. We talked about that in our Freak Show Pirates episode about the 97 team that almost made the playoffs.
Almost broke 500 team.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they were an under 500 team that missed the playoffs by 3 games. But at the time, it was like, boy, he used to sit behind home plate. He used to get real like into the games, real emotional. He's kind of like a Mark Cuban a little bit, kind of guy without like the crassness.
the dual no hitter.
Yeah. Yep.
It's Mark Cuban just sold the Mavericks.
right? Right.
So,
But that's who he was he was like a poor man's Mark Cuban. And I don't know, it just didn't work out. It wasn't like he was totally like you said, cheap or trying to sink the team. I think, like you said, there were some things he did that on paper looked like, oh, maybe this team's gonna rebuild, and then it didn't happen.
so I now we're gonna switch gears to probably one of the most successful. I don't know. It's between him and Galbraith, who's the most successful owner of all time, and Barney Dreyfuss. Tim, he didn't like cheap home runs. We know that. Uh, and the owner, I guess we're staying with owners who built stadiums for 200. Alex. Barney Dreyfuss, he owned the team from 1900 to 1932, and that's because he owned the team called the Louisville Cardinals, and he just basically moved all their players to the Pittsburgh Pirates. He has 2 World Series and 6 NL pennants, and the only reason he only won 2 World Series is because the other pennants were won before the World Series existed. So he probably had more World Series if 1901, 1902, 1903 counted as World Series. I don't know who was playing in that darn American League, but we would have beat them too. Or Honus
That's
Wagner
right.
boys.
Well, I mean, technically, he won 4 championships because that at the time that's as much as you could win.
Yeah.
So that I mean, at the time, that was celebrated as they won a championship.
So a very successful owner. Not only that, he decided, hey, I'm not done doing this. I'm going to build a stadium, and I'm going to name it after one of the heroes of the French and Indian War, in John Forbes. So we all know that guy. Yeah, we all love John Forbes. Yay, John Forbes. Um, he purchased some land in some little far off suburb of Pittsburgh called Oakland. At least it was. When did they build Forbes Field? 1908. Was the university? I guess the university was there, right?
Oh yeah, the university was there when they
I
built
don't
it,
think
and
they
and he
built the cathedral. Had they built the cathedral learning yet?
that I don't know, but he caught a lot of flack for doing that
Yeah.
because you didn't have well, you had cars, but you didn't have mass transportation back then, and people thought that was crazy that you would build it all
It's
the
so
way down
far
in
out of
Oakland.
town, Tim. You'll never make it.
Right, right. Now, again, like today, you
Yeah.
would think
Well, there's no
Oakland's
parkway. There's no
right,
anything.
right.
I don't think there
Oakland's like a five
trolleys.
minute trolleys, maybe horse and
Yeah.
buggy. I don't know. Streetcars. They had streetcars. I mean, but right now you could from downtown Pittsburgh to Oakland's about a 5 minute drive, but back then it wasn't that
15.
easy. Oh, I
15.
guess it depends on traffic.
Yeah.
but but he caught a lot of flack for doing that. And then the other thing he did, Steve, I don't want to steal your thunder unless if you already have it, but all the stadiums back then were made of wood.
Yeah, he built his out of steel.
Yeah, which cost him a lot more money. Remember, he built this. He didn't get the taxpayers to build it like they do now. So he actually built a more expensive baseball stadium because he wanted it to last.
What's funny is the people in charge politically back then were the Republicans. They ran the state and the city, so the Republicans would have laughed them out of town. I'm not even sure Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh had annexed everything, because cities just annexed other cities back then. I don't know how that works or why that works. I don't know if the residents had to fight each other when they got annexed, then the loser. Maybe they played each other in a baseball game and the loser got annexed. I don't know.
Maybe.
That would be more fun. Well,
and you also said he named it after General Forbes. That was another thing that people said, well, you built it, you spent extra money to put steel in it. You should name it Dreyfuss Field. And he wouldn't do it. He refused. He said, I'm not going to do that. He didn't want, I guess that's just what kind of guy he was. Like he didn't want all this glory and name things after him. He just wanted to build a nice park and he wanted it to last for generations after he was gone, which it did.
Well, yeah, and one of the reasons he built it in Oakland is because, and we've talked about this too, Exposition Park down on the north side would get flooded because it was near the river. That was that story where the chief almost drowned in Exposition Park.
Right.
So, I mean, he did it was 7 acres of land near the library, adjacent to Shenley Park. And actually, Andrew Carnegie assisted him, and it was reaction to the owners of the Philadelphia Athletics, Ben Scheib and some guy named Connie Mack. You might have heard of him, but they built a stadium, and I guess that was Connie Mack Stadium or Scheib Park, which lasted in Philadelphia till the early '70s. Which I actually have a piece of Connie Mack Stadium somewhere around here.
Nice.
Fun times. Yeah. It was a big stadium for the time. It ended up hosting one of the first World Series. It saw 2 other World Series, 3,
25, 27, 60,
and 60.
Yeah.
He was a good owner. He won a bunch of games, built a stadium with his own money. Imagine that, and kept the Pirates in town and competitive till 1932 when he sold the team. So, good for Barney Dreyfuss. Yay for him. I don't know much about him except for he didn't like cheap home runs. That's why his field was like 450 feet to dead center. That was the old story. They used to leave the batting cage out in center field because nobody could hit it that far. I mean, how big was it? Too in Oakland too. Like I know the wall is by so home plate. Home plate is like where? Like it's in a restroom somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah. Or it's in one of those buildings. It's down there. Yes.
Yeah, so you can go see that, and it's amazing to think how much of Oakland that field took up.
Yeah,
so, probably a better use of the land than whatever's Pitt doing with it, engineering school or whatever there. So
Steve, I have 2 other notes on Barney Dreyfuss that I think we talked about this in our Ed Doheny episode, but one is, the other contribution he gave to baseball was he's the father of the World Series, right?
Yes,
That's why the World Series exists, is because he had this idea of, hey, what if the 2 leagues played each other rather than just as 2?
Yeah, him and I forget there was another guy from the American League.
From the Red Sox.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they literally decided this in the middle of the 1903 season. This wasn't like this big meeting of minds and everybody sat down.
Like, hey, at the end of the season, let's play each other. Okay.
Right, literally. Yeah, Henry Calleja is the Red Sox owner, and they say, and everybody agrees, hey, I bet that would make some money, and they agree to do that. The other thing that is worth mentioning is in this era of baseball, you had the owners were despicable. They were like the Henry Frick kind of,
union breaker. Yeah.
Right.
Stick the Pinkertons on them. Yeah.
Yes. Like workers were cattle, and baseball players were no different. And that's why, I mean, people always talk about, the Black Sox scandal and, oh, that was terrible. How could they throw those games? Well, it's hard to blame them because I mean, yes, was that wrong? Yes. But the White Sox owner literally made them pay to launder their own uniforms. That's.
I mean, that water isn't free.
So that's the era we were living. That these players were living in. I will not let
you defame the late Charles Comiskey.
And Barney Dreyfuss was, by all accounts, pretty well liked by his players. I think in that 03 World Series, he gave them a larger share of whatever the profits were from playing that, stuff like that. I mean, again, players were cattle back then, workers were cattle, and Barney Dreyfuss seemed to be above that. So that was another thing that's worth mentioning about him.
Oh, here the nice in 1909 when the Dreyfuss actually stood outside and shook hands with the fans as they entered through the gates for the inaugural game.
Bob Nutting would probably do that.
I don't know. He does that at his own risk, at his own peril. He better have some security there. But, on from Barney Dreyfuss to a more modern owner that definitely isn't American. That would be one Mario Lemieux, and we're just going to cover his stint as an owner, not as a player. Although I guess some of this is him as a player too, which is just confusing. Um, so 1999, he still kind of owns the team. I'm going to give him credit for 3 Stanley Cups as owner. He saved the team from leaving Pittsburgh and got a new arena built in Pittsburgh, which seems to be a big thing to do as an owner, building an arena. I guess like building anything is expensive, as they're, anything from the Pharaohs to the Romans to good old Mario Lemieux and Barty Dreyfuss found out. So Lemieux's plan, actually, like when he took over the team was bankrupt because Howard Baldwin. So what he did was he like said, okay, I'm going to declare Chapter 13 and pay everybody like cents on the dollar, right, Tim? He's like,
Right.
you're all out of luck. You're all screwed. You shouldn't have done business with Howard Baldwin. That's exactly what he didn't do. Well, actually, what he did do was he actually paid everybody the full amount that he was owed, even though he didn't have to. And, that's just one of those things. Like sometimes you get some really quality people. Sometimes you get the, the Bob Nuttings of the world, and sometimes you get the Mario Lemieux. And he paid everything. Him and Burkle ended up owning the team. One kind of like darker thing was when they didn't get they tried to get the arena built for basically free by getting the Isle of Capri to bid on gambling, which they would have used gambling money to build the arena. But, Ed Rendell didn't like that because I guess he didn't have enough control over the project. So that gave to Barden, who basically did nothing with the casino. And so to get his new arena, like Mario had to start threatening the team, move the team to Kansas City. I remember him going to Kansas City and visiting, and Kansas City had a new arena. And I mean, I wonder who plays in that arena in Kansas City. They built it, right, Tim? I don't know. Maybe they just have concerts there.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually.
Maybe it's Taylor Swift concerts all the time. Travis Kelce hang out in that empty state. Well, it wouldn't be empty if Taylor Swift's there.
So it would be very crowded. I think everybody knew that was like necessary grandstanding. I don't remember too many people being angry with Mario for doing that. Whereas I feel like any other owner threatening to move, people would be like, "Go ahead, leave. We don't need you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." And I think everybody kind of knew that Mario needed to do that, and I think everybody blamed the politicians at that point because they had, like you said, they had that plan to build an arena without any taxpayer money, and our state government and all its wisdom shot it down. So,
well, it's wise when you're not getting your pockets lined.
Right.
So in November of 2021, a group called the Fenway Sports Group, who owns the Red Sox, there's the Red Sox again coming up in this podcast, and Liverpool in the English Premier League, they actually became majority owners of the Penguins. I think Lemieux has a small minority stake, but it doesn't seem like he has much involvement with the team besides just being like a spokesperson. And but overall, saved the Penguins. Very good owner. I decided, do we want to do a best and worst owner on the list? Sure, why not?
Sure.
Let's start with the worst. Bob, well, we'll start. I don't know, who's worse, Bob Nutting or Gabe Rubin? I'm going with Gabe Rubin. He killed a whole sport in Pittsburgh.
I mean,
we're still going to play baseball in Pittsburgh for the foreseeable future.
In a vacuum, it's Gabe Rubin, but the Pipers weren't the institution and didn't mean anywhere near as much as the Pirates did to all the people of Pittsburgh. So you could factor that in as well.
I also put Kevin McClatchy and Bob Nutting. I mean, it's amazing. They're all Pirate owners except for Gabe Rubin. He was the only one that could crack the worst owner list. As for best owners, definitely Art Rooney Sr. The Bartolo is kind of like, I think he's in the middle. He definitely said, I don't think he was a bad owner, and he's not like up there with Mario or Art, but he's definitely kind of like slides right in there. Did I miss anybody else? I don't think I had Barty Dreyfuss. Barty Dreyfuss definitely into the good owner category, up there with Mario. Defended the World Series, basically like established the Pirates, but For me, I think it's Mario and then Art and then probably like Dreyfus and DeBartolo in the good owner list if you're ranking.
Galbraith too.
Yeah, Galbraith. I mean, it's just, at least there's some two good owners. It's funny, like when you have a good owner, you can see the success and the team isn't as unstable. And when you have a bad owner, boy, the team almost like packs up and leaves town. That's kind of crazy, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Ownership means everything. I mean, you look across sports, you can tell which franchises are run well and which franchises aren't. And the ones that are run poorly might have a good season here and there, but overall, it's just not good. And the ones that are run well are consistently competitive and make the right moves and treat people the right way, seemingly. So, yeah, ownership is huge in sports, and we've had some good ones and some bad
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. I mean, the culture of any company probably it doesn't. It starts at the leadership and trickles down. And if you have bad leadership, then probably gonna have a poor culture, and that leads to poor results. But there you go. That's my TED talk on how to run a business or spirits franchise. As usual, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate everything, and don't worry, the ownership of this podcast won't be changing anytime soon. Right,
Unless someone wants to make us a big offer. Just saying.
I'm keeping my ownership stake of 50%. No.
That's fine. Mine's for sale.
Actually, you know what? It's I owe 49% and Tim owns 49%. The other 1% is owned by our pets between the two families. So they are the vote. They have their own little votes. So, but be that said as may, thank you for tuning in. Keep the likes coming. Keep looking us up on all the podcasts and all your distributors of the podcast, and check us out on our website. What is that's Steelers? Is that still Pittsburgh Sports Memory?
All the links are in the show description.
Yay! All right. Well, thank you very much, and I will catch you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Memory.